Hey,
Hey Michael, how's it going?
good morning, good afternoon, I guess.
Yeah, how are you?
We're doing okay over here. You know, you can't say this is normal anymore and that things are fine or okay, but we just kind of keep saying it anyways, even though it's just still chaos.
Doing our best.
Exactly. I'm happy that you're here and I'm excited to have a quick chat here and learn more about your work. Um, as we're kind of welcoming more people in here to the stream. Just a couple of quick notes. We'll be doing these conversations every Tuesday at noon in October, maybe 4 Tuesdays, but keep tuning in on Tuesday at noon. We'll be here. And we're featuring these kind of ACP spotlight events on artists like Arvin Temkar, who has work that's currently on the Georgia fence, which was just installed a couple of days ago. It features 8 artists on the Atlanta Beltline's Westside Trail, so where the Beltline crosses over MLK. And I guess that's a good enough intro. We're here to learn about you and your work, Arvin. You have a sequence of images from a project called Punk Black, if I've got the title correct.
Yeah, it's called POC Punks of Color.
Punks of Color. Love to know what drew you into that documentation. I'll pull up some of the pictures as we go here if I can remember how to get at them. And what brought you to start taking photos at these shows that you were going to?
Yeah, so when I was a kid, I went to a lot of punk shows, and when I was in college, kind of growing up, I was really into, I guess I was into the punk scene. I mean, I liked punk music a lot, but I found that oftentimes when I went to these shows in Boston or in San Francisco, where I went to college, or when I was living in San Francisco, I would, they would be predominantly white, and I would be one of the only people of color at the shows. So when I moved to Atlanta last year, I was looking for things to document, and somehow I stumbled upon Punk Black. They're an organization here in Atlanta, based in Atlanta, that puts on these shows that specifically highlight rock and roll groups of color. And I was just really drawn to that based on my own history, and I thought they'd be a great group to document. And so I asked if I could photograph some shows, and I went on the road with them a couple of times, and this series of images was made.
So the organization kind of would put on a touring collective where there'd be a bunch of bands that would be traveling together?
Yeah, so they had shows here in Atlanta every month, and then I think recently, within the last couple of years, they started going on the road and finding bands in an area like Chicago and Washington, D.C. and Oakland, and create a showcase of like 6 or 7 bands in a night, at a club. And it's really weird to look at these images now, considering, who knows when we're going to be able to go back and do this kind of thing.
Well, that's why part of the reason why I was so excited to see them and to share them. And I have to apologize. I don't know how to get my face out of the way and have just the images showing. It looks a real acquisitional to have them behind me. But the liveliness, of course, of them, the timeliness of them, and just this the fact that people seem to forget about Bad Brains in the 80s. Being a band of color, let's say, and I guess they were out of DC. And when you think about punk rock or hardcore music, it usually isn't the visual that you're representing. So it was like this refreshing new view that personally I hadn't seen before. So we're excited that we're able to showcase it this way. I love these kind of action shots that you have, but the way that you decided to create diptychs, can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so while I was at the shows, I was doing, I was documenting, and I hope to continue this project, but I was documenting like this image right here. You can see one of the members of Punk Black. He's spray painting a t-shirt to sell as merch, which is like the most punk rock way to, make a t-shirt, I think. But I also wanted to kind of document the folks who were at the shows, and I wanted to do portraits of them. So I had a bunch of images from the concerts, from behind the scenes, and then a bunch of images of just people at the shows. And I brought a white backdrop with me to take their portraits. And, I have a few different sequences of this work, like just singles and stuff. But I thought it would be really interesting to create diptychs like the one you're showing right now. I think it's just really striking, the woman's T-shirt versus what's written on the guitar. I thought there were ways to really kind of make those images complement each other.
I love the message on the guitar and just the idea of guitars being a political statement in themselves as a part of rock and roll, and how people have historically spruced up their guitars with statements and whatnot. And of course, the famous one from Woody Guthrie, "This machine kills fascists," which is experiencing a resurgence as shareable stickers people are making and starting to pass around again.
Yeah, I love that. I used to have one of those on my own guitar. I did.
Absolutely.
But stop killing Black people. This is one for the times. Really, it's an incredible statement.
Absolutely. There's also this thing that your pictures are getting at that I've only kind of heard about in hardcore and punk culture. I guess I've seen it a little bit. It's not been my history to go to those shows, but I've been adjacent to it at times in my life. And it's this aspect of community that you really get this great vibe from your pictures, that these are people who are A, having fun together, B, care about each other, 3, are in a kind of celebratory moment in a true community. And can you talk a little bit about that feel that definitely comes through in these diptychs of yours?
Yeah, Punk Black, the organization, the collective, they have a Facebook group, and they have one that's specifically for members and followers, fans, and it's called Punk Black, the group, and I'm part of it. And it's really great because you can really see the community there of people sharing kind of their own interests in music, things that they've been dealing with as a person of color or a Black person who's into rock and roll. And I think just the fact that there is this space created for POC folks to gather and express their love of rock and roll and punk, like, really kind of even strengthens that community. I mean, punk in general, like just that subculture itself is like a great community, but I think like this kind of subset of it, there's an extra element in there that really brings people together. I remember I was at a show once. I was at a Flogging Molly show. I don't know if you know that band.
I remember their name. Yeah.
Yeah, they're an Irish punk band, and I was really into this Irish punk when I was growing up. And I've seen so many Flogging Molly shows, and every show that I go to would be predominantly white people, Irish people, which is great. But sometimes I see other folks in the crowd. And one time I was standing next to these Latino guys with my friend who's Asian American, and we just looked at each other, and one of the guys was like, "Oh man, we found each other."
Right.
And it's just like something that you recognize, because there is an element, like, just a visual element of punk shows really being oftentimes very, very white, and rock and roll shows too.
Absolutely. And it's adjacency to white supremacy, even in some of the kind of nationalistic music coming out of England in the 80s. There's another photographer, Chris Killip, who kind of dusted off some work from the mid 80s at a particular club where he was photographing punk shows. And I went back and looked at it this morning. I saw it maybe earlier this year. And you look at the faces, it's all white faces. And everybody has a angsty, angry, frustrated kind of facial expressions, and I love the kind of joy vibe that you get, and like I was saying, the celebratory feeling in these pictures particularly. Here's a question for you as somebody who's spent time in this community and listening to this music. Have you ever thought of this kind of community crossover between punks and hippies? In that they, like they both are doing the same thing, and it's all about the people involved and taking care of each other and looking out for everybody and having a good time. But I think there's a little more symbiosis there than anyone would expect.
Yeah, well, definitely at these shows that I attended, I felt that people were having a really good time, having a lot of fun. There was definitely some mosh pits and stuff like that, but I didn't get like that. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I was drawn to punk, I think, because it's an angry, emotional music, and I think that's why people are drawn to the music. But I think also just the element of being together in a crowd and listening to music is also very joyful. I think I've always had my favorite concert experiences at punk shows. And you know, I have an interesting theory that punk rock is more related to country music than people might give it credit for. Uh, you know, I think like Mike Ness of Social Distortion kind of crossing over into country, and you know, I feel like Johnny Cash is a very punk rock character. So, I mean, I don't know about hippies, but there's definitely that symbiosis between genres.
I'm definitely baiting you a little bit there. I got to apologize. The country crossover is great, and especially just thinking about early country music, you know, before the 40s and old time country music, especially with these riffing fiddle tunes that can kind of go on forever and ever. And you would see crossover in those fans. I remember seeing in Oakland, I too moved to Atlanta from San Francisco, but you would see groups of kids who were really into punk and hardcore, but they also liked playing old time fiddle music. And I don't know what that's all about. Have you have you crossed paths with those folks?
I've seen them. Yeah. I mean, I think that's super interesting. And it's also interesting because I didn't know this. You know, when I was a kid, I saw music that I listened to and that I liked. And I was always wondering like, oh, where are like people who look like me, or like, you know, and you don't often see that in like old rock and roll, you know, Chuck Berry, Jimi Hendrix and stuff like that. And
Absolutely.
I found out recently that the banjo is actually an instrument invented by that originates, I think, in West Africa,
Absolutely.
and came over and was played by slaves, and that kind of became the root for blues and rock and all of that stuff.
That's totally true. And when combined with this kind of Scottish tuning and Scottish song formation, and it all kind of stewing together in Appalachia, there was a time when I knew some of the history a little bit better than that, but there was definitely that West African migration, and the whole thing kind of came together. The I'm interested in what it's like to arrive in Atlanta with some new eyes and fresh perspectives as a young photographer. I saw your Washington Post piece about Stone Mountain, which to an outsider, I always love to hear a fresh take on what is Stone Mountain like and responses to Stone Mountain. It seems that people who grew up here and have been around it forever kind of accept it as a normal thing. And I'm interested in your perspective and what it was like to create that piece.
Yeah. So, you know, I've been a writer for about 10 years. I'm kind of new to photography. I've been doing this for about being a photographer for about 2 or 3 years now, kind of trying to transition or, you know, meld my writing and my photography. So when I went to Stone Mountain, I was kind of curious about it as a Confederate relic. And I think I had preconceptions about the South, and I had preconceptions about what the town of Stone Mountain might look like. And I was really surprised to see when I went into the park and I walked around town, like just the diversity of the people. I mean, it was really amazing. Also very visual because there's like, you know, large Muslim population with the headscarves and all of that. There were Latinos, Latinas, you know, white people, black people. And so I started photographing, making portraits of people that I'd met, and started thinking about it more. And that kind of led to the essay that I wrote that included some of my photographs.
So what while you're working on this music project, you'll continue working on that. You're going to do some writing. Have you been working on something during the pandemic in particular that might be related to the 2020-ness of our times? Do you have some project that you're currently working on?
So I mean, I'm actually in Jacksonville, Florida right now. I'm
Mm-hmm.
visiting my dad, and you know, while I'm here, I've been documenting him. He's a retiree in Florida, and he moved here from California. And before that, we had lived in Japan. I grew up on an army base in Japan for middle school and high school. Um, and my dad is Indian. My mom is Filipino. My mom passed away in 2013, And so, following my mom's passing, my dad's kind of reconnected with his Indian roots. And here in Jacksonville, super randomly, he lives in a neighborhood that has a lot of other Indian immigrants. He didn't know this when he moved here, and in fact, one of his neighbors is actually from his own hometown and went to the same college that he went to. Whoa. So I've been kind of documenting his life as a retiree and kind of reconnecting to his Indian heritage. And it's also really a great experience for me because I was never exposed to much of that Indian culture when I was growing up. I feel much more Filipino culturally because of my mom. So now I'm, learning about going to temples and old Hindi songs and all this stuff that I didn't really have any connection to before. So that's, I'm hoping to continue that while I visit and in the future. It's hard to travel these days,
Of course. Can you tell me a little bit? I'm a military brat myself, like for lack of a better term. I've always hated that term, but I'm interested in how kids who grew up moving from base to base might have a different perspective on the world or even on America. And can you talk a little bit about how your upbringing might have led to a different perspective?
Growing up in Japan, I've definitely was fortunate to see a lot of the rest of see other parts of the world, and being half Indian and half Filipino, I've also been fortunate to kind of see those places. But growing up in Japan, actually, I think it made me feel much more connected to my American identity because I felt so disconnected, so removed from America, where my peers and the culture was that I felt like I should be part of. So, when I was a kid, I was like always wanting to go to like the Vans Warped Tour, and all that stuff. And I never could because I was in Japan. So I was like really into that when I got to college. A lot of my work, both my writing and my photography, really revolves around like American identity, what it means to be American, and, various like kind of perspectives on that.
Arvin, as you move forward, what do you think about the kind of dichotomy that you're working with writing and photography? Can you talk a little bit about how you will expect to leverage both of those against each other, or is there one that you feel like you'll lean on more and the other will be a supplement, or how will you kind of keep that stew boiling?
My identity has always been, since I was, in college or before, like writer. And so it's really weird now to think of myself as photographer. And to think that like, I don't know, I think like maybe some people have felt that those two, you can't do both. I heard, in National Geographic back in the olden days, it's like they kept the writers and photographers pretty separate because they wanted each to contribute in their own field. But I think these days, I think obviously you can be multitudes, you can have multitudes within you, and I think these days particularly, you kind of need to have several skill sets. And so I'd really like to continue, like with my Washington Post piece, to be able to produce work that kind of hits on both elements. So I think right now it's like I'm really just kind of, I'm always learning to be a better writer, and I'm new to photography. I'm learning to do that, and I hope that I can continue to do both while in my career.
It's like you need to find the outlets that are thinking more forwardly about how they assign and to whom they assign particular things to. That there's somebody who can be a heavy hitter in both mediums at the same time.
Yeah, I also see the value. You don't want to overload somebody with doing both tasks. Sometimes you just need a photographer. Sometimes you just need a writer. But like for the subjects that I'm passionate about, I hope that I can combine both and work on long-term projects that do both.
It really comes through in these pictures of yours on the fence, Arvin. I know I said it at the start, but I was excited to see them. I think they're a real new view, and they're look into a community that not everybody might know about. And by way of wrapping up, if those of you who are tuning in, if you'd like to see more of Arvin's work, it's up right now on the Atlanta Beltline on the Westside Trail. and it'll be up for a while. I'm not sure when it's coming down, but it'll be up at least through the end of October.
I think through June, right?
Probably much, yeah, right. I get the two fences confused about how long they stay up, but they stay up for a while.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
I appreciate you being here, Arvin, and it's been great talking to you. And thanks to everybody for tuning in. And thank you for your time, Arvin.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Cheers. We'll talk soon.
Bye.